Therefore, let us not judge one another anymore, but rather determine this, not to put an obstacle or a stumbling block in a brother's way. Therefore, let us not judge one another anymore. Now, I want to remind you, this is not judging on the basis of clear immorality and sin, or areas of clear doctrine. Remember, these are all people who would have agreed with Romans chapter 1 through 11. They all had saving faith, and they all understood salvation by faith alone, in Christ alone, those clear areas of doctrine. They had all unity there. We're talking about secondary issues. So remember that. There's a lot of people out there say, well, as Christians, we should never judge. That's not true. That is absolutely not true. That there are areas where a person is walking in immorality and sin, and we have an obligation, if we love that brother or sister in Christ, to confront that issue for the purpose of seeing them restored to fellowship with God. And so we're not talking about that. We're talking about secondary issues. In these secondary areas of just working out the practice of our faith in everyday life, he says, don't judge anymore in those areas. They don't stand and fall before you. They stand and fall before God. And so we're called to judge in certain areas, but not in these areas. He says, don't judge anymore. And then he goes on and says, but determine in your heart, but rather determine this, not to put an obstacle or a stumbling block in a brother's way. It says determine, it's really kind of make up your mind. This is something that we really need to make up our minds and determine in our heart that we're not going to do is we're not going to be a stumbling block. We're not going to put an obstacle in the path of somebody who's walking with Christ and seeking to follow him.